All right. So next up, we're lucky enough. Dick Huey is a longtime friend and stalwart here in this industry. So he's always like working on tons of interesting projects. So we got you here, Dick. Are you up?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
There you are. So we're going to let you take it away with two of the very, I don't know if you work with these projects or you're just friends, but let people know and take it away.
I'll give him the clue, and just wanted to reiterate how long you and I have known each other. It really has been a long time.
Wait, sorry. One thing. I apologize to do this. The dance party has started. So anybody who wants to go back to the page and head over to the dance party, not to leave this, but just know if you had enough of this, there is a dance party. Okay, sorry about that.
Don't you dare leave before this presentation, before these two interviews, please. Anyway, it's great to see you again, Brian.
Yeah.
You know, I've known each other through not just tech-related products, but also through the future of music. So,
yeah.
Some great organizations, a lot of great ideas. And this was a really fun presentation to see right before mine. Hereby, one I didn't know about, is I literally just came from a Sharon Van Etten live stream that she did tonight of her first record, which was amazing.
Wow.
Incredible performance.
That's cool.
Yes, my name is Dick Huey. I'm the founder of Toolshed. So we're a digital business consultancy that's now in our 18th year. We're based north of New York City in Sleepy Hollow, also known as the place of the Headless Horseman. We look for technology solutions that are solving big music industry problems, typically, and Paperchain, which is going to be my first interview, is one of those. Daniel Dewar is the CEO of Paperchain. Dan, you and I have spoken quite a bit about Paperchain, and I've been involved in the last year or so of your corporate life as an advisor. So I have a pretty good idea of what you're working on. Can you enlighten our viewers on what Paperchain is?
Yes, thanks, Dick. Just before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout the United States and recognize their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture, and pay my respects to elders past and present, as well as emerging elders in those communities. And also just to a note of respect and solidarity to people in Minneapolis and St. Louis around the US at the moment who are struggling for freedom and representation. So yeah, we've spoken a lot about Paperchain. For everyone that doesn't know, like Paperchain is the easiest and fastest way for labels and artists to access their streaming revenue. We connect to the data feeds for the DSPs such as Spotify, Apple, Google. We take in the daily trends data. We price the daily data so our users can see how much revenue they're making every day, not just the stream counts. And finally, we can make that revenue available on demand. So you can think of it similar to like factoring receivables, but instead of using invoices, we're using real-time or daily stream data, which means we can identify revenue much faster and make that available. So for example, you put out a release on Friday, Monday you log in, look at the activity on the weekend, see the revenue that's been generated, see the opportunities to invest in certain territories or mediums around that project to boost sales, and then we make the funds available to invest in those opportunities. I think by using the data in this way, we can do some interesting things around the financial product structuring by making it a much more efficient vehicle to access pipeline revenue at a much lower cost than traditional advanced products.
So there you have it. Dan, differentiation with existing financial products. How do you look at that?
Well, obviously immediately now that it's data backed, so it's a non-credit product. There's no need to check credit scores. There's no need to access that sort of information. It's simply data backed. There's no rights handed over. We're going by the back of the streams that have actually been generated. So they're proven revenue streams. They're earned revenue. They're just unpaid revenue. And because of that, there's a different cost structure associated with it because it has a different risk profile as a financial asset. So instead of paying up to 20 to 40% a year on interest that you would under a traditional advance or on a credit card, it can be as low as like 5 or 6% a year. And I think by doing it this way, we have different end goals and missions, and there's a difference in how advances are operationalized in ours versus traditional advances. It's not just some sort of outside capital that just gets sent to you when you need it, and then you're able to use it. It's more of a way of connecting the capital back to the activity that's happening in the label or in the artist activity or across the catalog. So by connecting the financing back to the data insights, and the ability to identify marketing or project opportunities and have the funds to take advantage of those, we think of it more as growth capital, or what we call as finance as a service. And it's really about having a financial product that fits into the workflows of a label or a distributor or even an artist management team, in a way for labels and artists to have transparent conversations around what revenue is in market and what's available and how that can be used.
Okay, and labels, how are they wanting to use these advances that you're making available through your platform?
I mean, it's different between labels. I don't think we've found a single use case that's consistent. And to be clear, we're working at the moment with independent labels that are generating anywhere from $30,000 a year in revenue up to even $10 million a year in revenue. So depending on the size and where they're at in different stages and what type of catalog they have, it's different. So it's also very different between labels and artist management teams now who are feeling, they're feeling the impact of COVID very differently. And so for some labels, it's there to optimize cash flows for label operations, while for others, they're looking at ways to pay artist income faster. So rather than paying artists every quarter or every half year, it's the way for them to pay artists, put them on almost like 2-week pay cycles. So as the revenue starts coming in, rather than holding on to it, they can just let that out, and we're the mechanism for them to do that. And I think it's a way for them to set up artists on 2-week pay cycles or shorter pay cycles without having to disrupt their accounting cycles, which has been very interesting to a lot of labels we've spoken with. And for us, that's also very interesting too, which goes back to the wider idea on where we're getting at. I think it's not just about creating, here's an advancing product, but now if we can change the way that money remittance occurs in the music industry, particularly to artists, now we get into some of the more interesting ideas about what it means for artists to be able to access regular income like that and what could be made available to them. Things such as healthcare or mortgages or childcare, things that most of us who do have a regular pay cycle are able to afford because of that consistent income. This can now be made available to an entire sector of the creative community that hasn't had access to it before.
Boom. Like I said, access to big ticket idea and one that's solves a pretty compelling number of problems in the music industry. So talk about the product itself. Sorry about the train whistle that comes with the territory. So the data and the advancing, are they two different products? Are they the same product?
Well, the data is a byproduct of the advances. We need access to the data to be able to do our financial modeling. And then the byproduct of that here is the data analytics suite. So if people are interested, they can just access the data component and just look at that as a way of looking at revenue from a purely analytical perspective. And then once you have that in there, there is the ability then to advance revenue on demand as you need it. So there is a decoupling of the two products made available.
Okay, and maybe talk for a minute about who you're working with and what the integration process looks like.
So right now we're working with mostly independent labels with direct deals to the DSPs or via Merlin. So we do have a data integration with Merlin. So for those labels, it's a simple drop-in of bulk API keys from Apple or Spotify or YouTube or FTP information from Merlin, and we can immediately start pulling in the catalog data and all the related streaming activity to that. There's no need to upload catalog or metadata. We get that via the DSPs. We take historical statement information and we have our own internal machine learning model that looks at historical information, allows us to predict what a per stream payout rate will be on any given month, which allows us to then price daily trends data. And ultimately, while we see artists as the ultimate beneficiaries, the users right now for us are record labels because they have the license to the data and also control the payments flow, which we need to tap into.
Good enough. There's a slew of questions, but I want to ask, or I want you to talk about one other thing in particular, and that's just a little bit about your background, Dan, and then of your co-founder, and how that informed this idea.
The other thing was
I think Gary is still. I think Gary, you're still alive.
His introduction started. I thought it was 7:30.
I think so too. Okay.
I think, can somebody mute Gary? Thanks.
I mean, I was a long time ago, I was a sound engineer. So I worked in music studios. So I understood the pain points around capturing split information and then getting that reported back. And then obviously the flow of money back to that. And then I worked in data and analytics, looking on the marketing side and attribution side. So I was always fascinated with what advertisers were doing with data and how they made decisions, marketing decisions or investment decisions based off that. And it just wasn't happening in the music industry. So my initial working with this started about 4 years ago, and it was attempting to marry those two worlds. The real genesis goes back almost 25 years ago when one of the other co-founders here, Dave Tomaselli, founded his own label here in New York, Stature Records. And when he set up that label, it was a JV with Warner, ADA at the time. But when he set it up, he wanted to pay his artists every 2 weeks. But to do that, he had to actually build his own royalty accounting software platform because the current solutions didn't do that. He grew that label, and over time, when around 2004, he wound that label up. But then he started selling the royalty accounting software to other labels, and that became Backlash Solutions, or SR1, which was recently acquired by Exactuals. And so at the onset of digital, he was ingesting not only physical statements, but also all of the digital statements for iTunes and others, and then running the end-run liabilities and payments down to the artist for a lot of record labels that were using that. When I first met him in 2012, he was leading that business, but one of the biggest challenges for labels was around cash flow, because what happened in the music industry was there was a huge shift in consumption where now revenue was being generated at a much faster pace and in tiny micro transactions that were occurring every day, but the revenue and the payments process hadn't changed. So even back in 2012, we talked about this idea around how you could use sales data to create like a micro factoring model. Back then there were some gaps in the data. And also I was only here in New York on a 1-year visa, and I went back to Australia. When I reconnected with him in 2017, I talked to him about some of the initial work that I've been doing, and he looked at the problem again, because not only did it still exist, but now there was a proliferation of data access through the APIs to the DSPs so we could get data directly. But then you also had, there were some really interesting things you could do on the finance side as well. So I think a lot of the technology caught up to some of the ideas, and that's what we've been building out. Okay.
I think we're at time. I just want to address a couple of the questions in the chat and try to bring them in. So real quick, the question, can you please ask Dan if he's looking at previous earnings and forecasting future earnings? And is this master rights or publishing rights? And how do you pay for your service? Do you take a percentage?
Sure. So yes, so for now we're looking at pipeline revenue only, and that's because obviously it's earned but unpaid, so it becomes very predictable, and there's low risk in being able to advance that. In the future, yes, we have done some early work on predicting what future revenue looks like, but we have to get to a point where there's certain confidence intervals on what we would say could be generated over a certain period of time. With catalog, we've noticed in the work we've done so far with catalog, it's very easy to see that predictability and predict what's coming in the coming months. With things that are new in market, it's less predictable. So again, it just depends on the catalog type, but we will get there. But for now, it's just looking at pipeline revenue. In terms of costs, yes, we take, there's a small fee as part of that. So there's a cost to the capital. So say if the capital is say 5%, and then on top of that, Paperchain has a 0.5% fee on top of that. And we take that out of the advance.
Daniel Dewar, everybody. Dewar at paperchain.io. Any questions? I couldn't address all of them in the chat, but please send him or me an email, and we're happy to put you in touch.
Let's go to the Eric Mendelsohn one.
Yes. Okay. Well, I touched on a couple of his questions.
Well, Eric, are you here? Do you have a specific you want to? So there's advantages to certain people in the supply chain for not being transparent and having money leak along the way. Do you find that this is an issue, or how does? Do you want to ask it, Eric?
I would say the conversations are less around that, and it's more around the position of the labels. So in some cases, it's kind of like from a label position, yeah, it's like we're okay, we're doing well with cash because of streaming, so it's not really an issue for us. And but when you talk to the artists and the management teams, it is an issue. So there is that disconnect in the conversations that are happening, and I absolutely do agree that there are some people or some people in the middle layer who do benefit from having opaqueness rather than full transparency in that. Ultimately, what I can say is that I think this is a way that works within their model because it doesn't disrupt their cash flow. It becomes an external source of capital that can go access directly to those artists that they're servicing, which allows them to provide a better service. But it doesn't disrupt their cash flow because they're still operating on their traditional on the initial cash cycles that they work with.
Eric? You don't think that the money that's sitting in some of these aggregators' accounts on their books that they're either maybe lending out or accruing interest on affects their cash flows at all?
Well, certainly for those, some of them that may be in a position to do that, they may be able to, they may see that as a detriment to what they're doing with their cash. On the other hand, if they want to put that to work, we can use that capital to also earn them a return by providing advances to other artists in the industry.
Yeah, cool. I love what you guys are doing.
Cheers. Thanks.
Very interesting. Let's have a big hand for Daniel.
Thanks, Brian.
Yay.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Brian and Shazana.